All right, everyone, welcome to the Sarcasm and Liberty Sunday stream. Now, for those of you who have been following us, typically the stream is just me and Jason.
Everyone, welcome.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, I'm getting sorry.
that was my fault.
So we have a special guest. This is something I want to continue to do on some Sundays, where me and Jason get a chance to talk to some people from the community, kind of more one-on-one, and get more involved in it. So our first special guest is David Kirk West. So for those of you who don't know, he has a pretty successful YouTube channel. Looks like you got what, like 7,000 subs right now, I think, something like that.
About 7,500 subscribers and I think 7 million views.
Nice. That's amazing. And like that's where for me my first introduction to David was a video and I already forgot the guy's name, something Bolton, right?
John Bolton, who's now the what's his position now? He's
Secretary. Is he Secretary of State?
Yeah, he's Secretary of State now.
Now this was my first introduction to David, and if you guys go to his and if I'll let you plug your YouTube channel specifically so people can make sure after the fact. I haven't done it yet, but I'll make sure I have a link to your page in the description and everything. But and I feel like I probably even still have it in my YouTube history, because I think here it is. John dodges question, insults anti-war veteran. That's the title of the video. It's got like 200,000 views right now. This was my first introduction, and I really enjoyed it because you came out and you made a solid point, and then he just kind of immediately did the politician thing, trying to twist it around a little bit. He kind of low-key called you dishonorable, which I felt was really messed up, because he made this like, well, the honorable, you're doing a disservice to the honorable vets, and I was just like, oh, what an ass. But no, you didn't back down, you stood your ground, and you were, some might say you're a little aggressive there, but I felt like you were I referred to it several times as just savage. You let him know where you stood, and you made a great point. And while the editing doesn't work exactly in your favor, you had a lot of applause and a lot of support there. That was my first introduction, and that's when I started actually looking up, because people were like, I was like, this is awesome, and people were like, oh yeah, check him out, check out his YouTube, and and that's when I can't remember if I had tagged you or somebody else had tagged you, and I made the offer, and you were like, yeah, sure, I'll come on your show. But yeah, so I haven't been able to get through everything yet, but I'm kind of slowly going through some of your videos and getting some ideas of what your activism is like. You said you're doing a lot of guns right activism and things like that. So and then one of the things, because I'm a vet too, so seeing a lot, some good veteran people that are out there that can actually speak on behalf, of war isn't good kind of thing, and a lot of people get these, a lot of veterans, and I've talked to a lot of vets, and I don't think it's surprising that a lot of veterans come out starting to be more libertarian.
Not at all.
And it's just because you see things over there, you hear stories. For me, I didn't personally, I never had to shoot at anybody or anything like that. But as I talk about a lot, I do a lot of, on Wednesday nights at the VA, I am a facilitator for mental health, people with PTSD and some severe stuff. And I was horrific stories of things that people had to do, where it was them or somebody else, it was, if they didn't do something, they were going to die, or everybody was going to die, kind of stuff like that. And some of the horrible stuff people had to do, and just how hard it is for them to live with that. And it kind of, you carry stuff like that around with you. And it's sad because, and I feel like, Jason, we have a meme, and I think it was a Thomas Hobbes quote, I want to say, about sending, the people are making these decisions to send, they're removed from the battlefield.
Yeah, I'll look it up. I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, it's a meme I know we had, and I want to say it was Thomas Hobbes, but I might be completely wrong on that one. But yeah, the whole the basic idea though is you have these people in power who are making these decisions to send these people overseas and to die and to kill people.
Thomas Sowell. I don't know.
Sorry, yeah.
But it's the quote is, "It's hard to imagine a more stupid or more dangerous way of making decisions than by putting those decisions in the hands of people who pay no price for being wrong."
Yes. And I feel like that kind of sums up a lot of the, like from what I've seen, and from what I've seen just from you, David, like a lot of people who are veterans and have been through like some stuff overseas and experiences, kind of, you start to see that, like you're paying the price for people who, don't have to go through those same experiences. So, but yeah, for to start with, David, if you want to kind of give everybody like an introduction of yourself, and if you want to just kind of give a brief overview of your, I don't know if you want to start at your military history, or if you want to kind of go into your activism. I'm going to let you make that call.
Yeah, sure. I'll tell how I became a libertarian. Real quick, first, I just want to do a little quick correction. John Bolton is the National Security Advisor. I just looked that up. No wonder I couldn't remember. It's like a fake made up thing. I mean, can you tell? I've grown too pessimistic about politics to really closely follow them anymore.
Well, before we do though, you want to make sure you can plug in your for anybody watching your, like your YouTube channel name or like your URL?
Actually the best way just to check out my work would be just to either look up Buck the System, that's my production company, on YouTube, or go to buckthesystem.tv, which that's my website. It's kind of set up geared towards like clients coming and looking at it, but you can find all my short films and stuff, and political activist stuff through that. And you can definitely get to my YouTube through that. Buck the System.
For me, I found some of your stuff just on YouTube.
Yeah, that'll bring it up too.
Yeah. So, so if you want to go ahead, because as you said, that's actually like one of the things I like to do when I really get a conversation going with a person for the first time, giving them that chance to explain why they're libertarian. That would be a great starting point.
Yeah. So what I should tell you is how I became like a libertarian anarcho-capitalist. So I live in Southern Oregon, a small-ish town called Klamath Falls. Although I actually grew up in Northern California. I was born in Wairika, and I grew up in a tiny town like 15 miles from the Oregon border. I mean, the middle of nowhere, 300 people out in the mountains. I went to a public school, but it only had like 35 kids in it. That's how small of a place it was. A little logging community. So, I say that because I feel like I've always kind of, I was born to be like a rugged individualist. Like I grew up backpacking and hunting, shooting guns. I actually grew up in the part of Northern California that has been trying to secede and form their own state since like the 1940s. So, libertarianism was kind of like in my blood. But I just grew up, for the most part, fairly traditional, conservative, definitely those libertarian leanings, super pro-gun. I grew up, I'm a Christian, so I grew up in the church. There's always kind of that aspect of supporting individual liberty. I think that Christianity strongly supports it. I'm
sorry to interrupt, but what denomination?
I actually grew up in a tiny, tiny church, like the only church for 60 miles in either direction. So just kind of non-denominational, Baptist, essentially.
We grew up Baptist, me and Jason.
Yeah, I go to a region, Northern California, Siskiyou County.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, I don't know what they would have out there.
I mean, there's like nothing. It was actually my grandpa was the pastor of it when I was really little, and he moved to a new church. But it's basically a church that's ran by an organization called Village Missions that sends pastors to tiny communities that couldn't otherwise support a pastor. But essentially I grew up Baptist. I go to a smallish Reformed conservative Baptist church now in Klamath Falls where I live. So, and that's setting up for later, but that also plays a role in why I turned very anti-war libertarian.
Yeah.
But so I was basically raised around a lot of like just kind of traditional conservatives, raised to think the military is heroic and the military is just like the most noble thing possible. So since I grew up, hunting and backpacking and playing paintball and playing airsoft, it was like really natural for me to want to join the military. I'd always wanted to have adventures.
Yeah.
So I actually enlisted I was in the delayed entry program. Like my whole senior year of high school, I enlisted between my junior and senior years. I was in the delayed entry program. I was like Mr. Gung Ho. I convinced. I was kind of the ringleader of, probably almost a dozen guys that I knew that all ended up joining the military at various branches. And so I wanted to be a ranger, so I signed up to be a 13 Fox, which is forward observer, and then I got the option 40 ranger contract, they call it, where you enlist to go through RIP and be a ranger. So I enlisted. I shipped out like 2.5 weeks after I graduated high school.
Just real quick, your story sounds like so much similar to mine. I like 12 days after I graduated, I was in basic. Yeah.
I think it was 18 for me or something. I mean, it was just as soon as I could.
Yeah, I did the delayed entry program too and everything like that. Well, that's interesting.
So what was your MOS?
I was 88 November. I actually wanted to go in as infantry, but I was colorblind.
What's 88 Mike's a truck driver? What's 88 November?
Transportation coordinator. So you kind of like you plan convoys and stuff like that, and do all like a lot more of the technical work.
Yeah, it was weird. So I'm a 13 Fox. So it's a combat arms MOS, but for some reason, I think they've changed it, and now they go to basic at Fort Benning. But at the time, all 13 series MOSs, which is like artillery, go through basic at Fort Knox. And so I actually went to basic with a lot of. Did you go to Fort Knox?
No, I went to. Fuck, I'm gonna get
Jackson.
Jackson, that was it. Yeah.
What was that? Missouri or something?
South Carolina.
Oh, okay. I knew it was some southern state. I don't know. Yeah. Anyway, I went to basic at Fort Knox, and there was a lot of 88 mics there. That's why I asked about that. But and honestly, like at first, I loved it. Like I'd grown up backpacking, so I was the guy that like loved ruck marching and would get yelled at by the drill sergeants because I'd like grab the backpack from like the fat kid that was like falling behind and just like throw it on my chest. I'd be like, you can't do that. And I'd be like, 3 mile ruck march. This is like stupid. I gone backpacking and hiked 15 miles in a day with a heavier backpack. So I loved it at first. I loved basic training. The worst part for basic training for me was that like I felt like I wasn't actually getting trained that well. I grew up shooting. I bought an AR-15 the day I turned 18. And I remember like feeling like I was not being taught. I got in trouble a lot actually in basic training for not a huge trouble or anything, just for, I remember one time my drill sergeant was telling me, you see this private, this is a 7.62. This is what an AK is going to shoot at you. And I was like, that's 7.62 by 51. You're talking about 7.62 by 39. Do push-ups, Wes. I knew more about guns than most of the people teaching me, which was frustrating. Yeah. And I remember, they wouldn't let me adjust my own sights. They'd come around and do it for you. And I'm like, you're adjusting it backwards. They were moving my front post down when it's supposed to go up. And then they get mad at me. But sure enough, then I'm like, well, now my group's way low. So that was my biggest frustration with the military at that point was that was that they weren't teaching me I felt advanced enough stuff.
Well, and that's the thing when you're talking about basic training, a lot of people don't really understand exactly how basic it actually is.
Very
like
basic.
It is so boiled down for dummies, some of the stuff they teach you, and you could just be sitting there just like, because like you got it, most everybody else got it, but there's like that one really dumb person that just can't get it, and they're still teaching everybody like they're teaching that one dumb person. And everybody's just like, oh, this is killing me. Like, it's very basic. Yeah.
I remember being so nervous going into basic training. Like I was like, oh man, I really should have like trained more and ran more. I was like, this is gonna be hard because I never ran. I hated running. I backpacked a lot, but I never really did much running.
Well, and my very first, it was push-ups for me. Like my run time was like 14 minutes for my 2 mile, but I just could never, like, I was like, oh God, I'm going to fail on the push-ups. For some reason, I just couldn't do like the right amount of push-ups. Yeah. It's like, you never feel like you got enough, but then you're like half the time you end up being over-prepared.
Right. No, that's what happened to me. Cause I felt good about sit-ups and push-ups and everything, but I was like, oh, did I work hard enough at running? And honestly, I was like a skinny kid. So my very first 2 mile timed run, I ran 12:54, and I think 13 is what you needed to get 100. So it's like,
yeah.
That was when I realized, basic training is going to be really easy.
Yeah.
And so it was pretty easy. There were, in retrospect, the seeds of discontent being sown already.
Oh yeah.
And realizing the military was not the heroic organization I thought it was. You know, in my mind, the thing bothering me most was like, am I really being trained? I feel like I knew more about guns before I came here. I knew more about shooting. I knew more about that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But I remember, you know, we'd be doing cadences, and you know, as a serious Christian and someone who at this point, I should step back a bit. At this point, Ron Paul was running for president, 2008. I had started self-describing as a libertarian when I was maybe 16 or 17. Now, I was not where I am now, but I was already like, you know, why is there a war on drugs? Why are automatic weapons banned? Stuff like that. But I was like, well, I really like Ron Paul, but I disagree on national defense. It was like my big disagreement that I feel so stupid about now. But so I joined thinking I was joining like the most heroic organization there was. I joined thinking that I was going to be protecting people and liberating the oppressed people of Iraq. And I joined up, you know, I wanted to be a ranger. Like, I wanted to be the most elite thing you could be as an 18-year-old walking into a recruiting center off the street. I was very much like the for God and country guy. And I very quickly realized that there actually weren't that many of us in the military. I remember being shocked and kind of disturbed at how many people were seemingly just there because they're like, well, I had a kid, so I couldn't pay child support, so I joined the military. Or, you know, I want to be a truck driver so I can pay for college. And I'm thinking,
For me, I just didn't know what I was doing with my life. So like, I joined the Army.
Yeah. And I mean, and I think that's a lot of people. And I think that's why so many people end up being like turned into libertarians by the military, because they just kind of join up not thinking much. And then they're like, oh, shit, what is this?
Yeah. Well, and if you join, like when you join at a young age too, because like, I mean, honestly, I grew up very conservative, and you know, for a lot of my, like, you know, when you join the military, you kind of get this idealism pushed into your brain. So, you know, but when you start to, like, you know, when, like you were saying, you know, like you start to kind of see things that don't quite match up. See, my thing was that the military wasn't pushing idealism on me. I was too much of an idealist for the military. So I remember we would be doing cadences, and I am not like a quiet person. I'm a loud person. My wife gets pissed at me because I'm always loud and like talking loud. She's like, can you just talk in a quieter voice? I'm very outgoing. I'm very much like kind of a alpha personality. I mean, I want to be a film director. Like, that's what I do. So it's not like I was some timid guy at basic training. Yeah.
But we'd be doing these cadences, and they'd be like, when you say, you know, it'd get to the point you say, yell kill at this point. I remember what it was.
Yeah.
And I was like, this is stupid. You know, I don't have any problem killing somebody. I would honestly love to kill a bad person, but I joined the military to protect people. I'm just not going to say that. And I remember the drill sergeant at one point noticed I wasn't saying anything and like thought I was like this timid, you know, shy guy. And he's like, why aren't you screaming kill, private? Let me hear you yell kill. And I was like, no, drill sergeant, I joined, and I told him, I was like, I joined the military to protect people. I'll kill if necessary, but that's not my intention here. Yeah. And he was like taken aback, and everyone kind of laughed at me, and I just rolled my eyes. I'm thinking, I'm one of like 8 guys in this whole basic training company with an actual combat arms MOS. These are like a bunch of people that want to be, you know, supply guys and truck drivers. And stuff. And I was like, I'm the only person here that actually, I think it was the only person in the company with a Ranger contract. So I was just kind of like, whatever, these guys are idiots. Like, when I get further along in my training, I'll be with more like-minded people. And it kind of stayed that way. You know, then I went to AIT, and I thought maybe at AIT, when I'm only around other 13 Foxes, everybody will be more like-minded. And they weren't. Okay. And then I went to airborne school after that, and still weren't really like-minded. And I thought, well, you know, this is airborne is like a big Army thing. Like, it's, you know, there's chicks here. There's like, you know, fat sergeants that re-enlisted and just wanted to do something fun. Like,
it's like the old fat reservist sergeants. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, exactly. They signed up, they re-enlisted if they could get airborne or whatever. And so then I was like, well, when I go to RIP, the Ranger Indoctrination Program, that is where I'll really start meeting people that were like-minded. And then I made it to that, and there still wasn't really happening. And so I was starting to get a touch concerned, because a whole way along the way, I would have people, like when we would talk politics and stuff, and I'd be telling people, you know, oh, thank you. Sorry, my wife is bringing me some country fried steak and
nice
mashed potatoes and corn. I've got a good woman here. Anyway, so I was getting concerned at this point, but I was like, you know what? Once I deploy, it'll be good. And then when I actually got to my unit and we started like doing some pre-deployment training and stuff, it was like, okay, you know, now I was really getting to do a little bit more advanced military type stuff. You know, I really felt more like, okay, like now I'm really starting to learn tactics and shooting and stuff. And so for a while, I was really excited. And then I deployed in May 2009. It was like I'd been in for almost a year at that point. I deployed to Mosul in Iraq for, thankfully, not for very long, for 4.5 months, because everyone who operates under SOCOM, like Rangers do, and at this point I was stationed at 3rd Ranger Battalion, so I'm in Fort Benning. We only deployed for like 4.5 months at a time, which was nice. And I was so excited to deploy. I was like, oh, I'm going to be doing the Lord's work. I'm going to be fighting terrorists. I'm going to be protecting people. And like the day after we got there, we found out that a corporal from, I was in D company. He was from B company. He was a guy I'd met like, sorry. He was in our company. We had another guy got killed from another company. He was in my company, but I was in 3rd platoon and he was in 2nd platoon. So we were split up in platoons. So he was a guy that I had only met like super in passing. I had like no emotional connection to it, but he got killed in Tikrit. And so everyone was like really hopped up and angry. And so of course I am too. I'm like, oh man, like now I know why we're here. Like we're fighting the good fight. And hold on a second. Sorry.
No, you're fine, man. You're fine.
Anyway, and so at first I was like just super hopped up. I mean, ready to go shoot some terrorists.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I don't know, maybe a week or two later, after we kind of got settled in, when I first started getting to go off base on missions. And at first, I mean, I was so excited. Obviously, I wasn't calling for fire in Iraq. I was a private. There were several guys ahead of me, and none of us were really calling for fire anyway. So I basically just operated as an infantryman. Like I would just get kind of moved around, just as like the newest guy there. For a while, I was like security for a sniper. So I just like carry a ladder and climb up on a building, and you know, he'd be watching one way, I'd watch the other. Then for a while, I was I manned an RWS, remote weapon system, like a remote control 50 cal on our strikers. And at first I was really excited, but as the deployment wore on, that started fading, and I started just being like, what are we really doing here? Yeah. You know, the thing where I remember really being like, David, what the hell are you doing? Was when we were like tossing this house, because we'd go, you know, raid a house and then hit all the houses around it, our follow-up targets. And we were basically told no one in Iraq was allowed to have more than 1 gun and 50 rounds of ammo. So we'd be like shaking out people's beds. And I remember shaking out, and an empty AK magazine fell out. And I, you know, dutifully picked it up and carried it over to my team leader and gave it to him so he could put it in the evidence bag. And like, as he was taking it, I was just like, what am I doing? Like, I'm enforcing Iraqi gun control laws?
Right, yeah.
What is this? I'm thinking to myself, I have an AR-15 and an M1 carbine and an SKS and tons of, I mean, I don't know, 15, 20, 30 round magazines back at home. I'm like, they're loaded. This is empty. I'm just thinking, this is silly. And then, you know, at first, you know, when I'd be pulling security, I'd be like, you know, someone would, and we always operated at night, and there'd be, or almost always, and there'd be like, you know, someone would be sleeping on their roof. A lot of people slept on their roofs in Iraq, and I'd be on an adjacent roof just pointing my gun like, oh man, get up so I can shoot you. And as it went on, I'm like, this is literally like a family sleeping on their roof. I grew up in the middle of nowhere and slept out on my porch almost every summer growing up. So I started like relating to these people and being like, what am I doing sitting here pointing a gun, waiting for somebody to stand up and blow them away? It's going to be some like, you know, mom getting up to go take a leak in the middle of the night. What are we doing? And then I started realizing that my fellow soldiers didn't give a rat's ass about these people. They viewed them like animals. They were, you know, basically racist against them. They dehumanized them.
And if I can like just jump in real quick too, because it was actually something we were talking about last week. I think it was on our Tuesday stream. And one of the things I talked about, like my experience overseas, of like, you know, the Middle Eastern people were all Haji. That's what you called them. You called them Haji. And it was a way to like separate them from being a person. Absolutely. Even if it was like just wasn't a person that was supposed to be your enemy. Like that's just who they were. Because when you kind of get in this mindset of like everybody that isn't wearing your uniform is a potential enemy.
No, exactly. And that's so I remember we'd go out. And of course, we're given like minimal information. They'll be like, this is a suspected bomb maker. And we go raid their house. And then we find absolutely nothing. And then we hit all the houses around them. And I'm like, these are their neighbors. And there was this assumption, well, they're Iraqi, so they're all in this together and all working together. And I'm like, I barely talk to my neighbor. I mean,
right? Yeah.
How do we know that Iraqis aren't the same? And we'd end up arresting these guys. And we'd take them and drop them off at this, like, you know, we'd arrest them. Take them and drop them off at this facility where they would be like held and interrogated. And we were basically told they can be held for 2 weeks and then, you know, we have to let them go. So inevitably, numerous times, we would then go back out with guys that we had arrested 2 weeks earlier to take them to an Iraqi like police station, I think it was, to be reprocessed back into society and be released. So now these are guys that were being released because they didn't do anything. And we'd be releasing them, you know, back into the wild, and all the other soldiers took it upon themselves as like their patriotic duty to make these guys' lives miserable. They'd be bitching about, why are we releasing them to shoot at us again? And I'm thinking, we haven't taken fire this whole deployment. What the hell are you talking about? Yeah. Shoot at us again. They never shot at us in the first place.
If I want to like jump in again, I'm sorry to like kind of cut you off, but I feel like when you're talking about some of these things, I'm like, man, I can relate. Like, you know, I wasn't in the same place as you, but like just even in like when I was in Kuwait, we'd have local nationals, and it would be like Pakistani and like Egyptian people, like not even Kuwaitis or Iraqis, you know, just local people from outside the country that were there for work. And then they would be driving trucks and they would get treated like shit just because they were Middle Eastern. And these are just people like, you know, and like, here's my thing is like, we'd go on these convoys when we'd stop somewhere, you know, and they'd have all this food in their truck and they would like offer us stuff to eat. And they would always be so nice to us and everything like that. And then like you turn around and you'd see these soldiers just treating them like shit to their face for no reason. And I would just, you know, it was like, I don't know, exactly. It's like this epiphany moment. You're just like, why this person's not any different than me? They're here doing a job, you know, like they don't mean me any harm. And in a lot of the cases, some of the people I got to interact with, like, were very nice and like genuinely good people. One of the things I brought up was something I didn't actually realize. And a person I talked to that was like, she was like studying Islamic Arabic culture. And like when I had a phrase book where I was always trying to like, because I had to deal with these people who knew no English. So I was always trying to, you know, pick up words and like minor phrases so I could help guide them to like different areas. And so they have a minor understanding. And then whenever I would do this, and I would actually have the book, and then they would actually help me pronounce things, you know, like I would try to pronounce it, show them what word I was trying to say. And then they would like help me say what it was. And then they would always do, every one of them would always do the same thing, as every time I would do that, they would start patting their chest. And I didn't know what that meant. And I had talked to this person, and for them, like, doing something like that was them putting you in their heart. And like, because like me taking that step to try to connect with them meant something to that person. And they were like putting me in their heart as like, you know, you're a kind person, and like, you know, like kind of like almost like a prayer type thing. Huh. And I'm like, these are just people, you know, like that, like, you know, I see one day and they thought enough of me to like actually like think of me in this like kind of special way. You know, like that's like some, like for me, a lot of the epiphany kind of stuff I had overseas was like things like that, of just like all of my interactions dealing with these people who are just there doing a job. You know, and I was like, why would I treat them any differently? Like these, you know, it's not like, you know, it's different if a guy's got a gun and he's trying to shoot you, right. But that's not everybody over there, you know, that's not the entirety of that country.
Right. I really wish I had gotten more of a chance to really interact with some of the Iraqi people like that, because I didn't. I mean, what I always tell people, and you know, you'll understand this, but Iraq is basically like a police action at this point, you know, when I was there. Yeah. And so I tell people, like, if the regular army is kind of like police where they're patrolling and interacting with people, I was the SWAT team. Yeah. So, I mean, we just arrested people. I mean, I never said two words to an Iraqi person while I was there.
Well, like there's something, I mean, and you'll probably find this interesting because, you know, how you said you'd wish you'd be able to like have some of these interactions. There's actually like, when I was in Kuwait, we had to do this mission where we had to go to the civilian airport to pick up these contractors that were flying in. Now, we had this, the government, U.S. had this deal with the Kuwaiti government where we weren't allowed to show a military presence at their civilian airport. So when we went there, we actually could not have our guns. We had to keep our M16s away, and we had to dress up in civilian clothes and try to like blend in the best we could. And like their flight got delayed by like a couple hours. We were hanging out in the airport for a couple hours, you know, and we like walked around, you know, like I got some like Kuwaiti dinars and I like, you know, we bought some food and stuff like that. And like, you know, like it was nerve wracking, you know, because you're kind of like on edge, you know, and I'm like, shit, if something happens, I can't just pick up my rifle and defend myself in this situation. You know, but we would have to do stuff like that. But, you know, like I would see this side of that culture I never saw before because, like, I mean, and I'm talking like when this specific situation was in Kuwait, you know, there were girls walking around like looking like American girls, you know, like they weren't in hijabs and all this shit, you know, and like you'd see some people in rows and then you see people just like wearing just like we'd be driving and then like we'd stop somewhere and then it's like a car with like teenage girls would like pull up next to us and they'd all be like waving at us and stuff like that and trying to get our attention. You'd see kids, like little kids in the back seat, like waving at us, like, you know, like wanting us to wave back and things like that. That happened all the time. I mean, like, cause we drove around all over that fucking country, you know, and, but you would see that stuff all the time, you know, and like, it's hard to be in a place where you can see stuff like that and not, you know, start kind of realizing this, idea that is kind of being planted in your head is not entirely true. You know, like not everybody is a bad person over there. There are a lot of people there. They're just people.
Yeah, absolutely. That's exactly what I realized. What actually hit me even stronger than that. Mm-hmm. What wasn't even just that, oh, these are people. Because I feel like I went over there knowing that.
Yeah.
You know, and because I was very bothered whenever I started. I mean, honestly, I had basically never even seen anyone who was like just genuinely, truly racist until I joined the military. Then I was like, people like that exist? Like, what is this? Right. Why? You know, and it just, so that kind of thing bothered me. And so, yeah, I just felt like people were always trying to dehumanize them. You know, I'd see guys like, we'd be taking some guy who we just held for no reason, apparently, for 2 weeks to release. And the guy would like push him in, punch him in the stomach, and he'd end up like puking himself, pissing his pants. You know, guys would, I never saw anyone do this, but I knew one guy who joked all the time. He's like, yeah, I'm going to pee in a bottle sometime and try to lift up his mask and try to get him to drink it. Like I'm giving him water. I'm like, it's disgusting.
Yeah. And so that's so messed up. Yeah.
What started striking me then wasn't just these are people. It was, that guy wasn't shooting back at, that guy was not shooting at us, no matter what you say about releasing him and now he can shoot at us again.
Yeah.
But I don't blame him if he wants to now.
Yeah.
That's what I started realizing. And
well, and I think that's a great point is because a lot of the time, especially overseas, we tend to create our own worst enemies. And then like the aggression you're going to have towards these people who mean you no harm. Why wouldn't they start to want to mean no harm?
Mm-hmm. I mean, that was what really started bothering me, because I was thinking, man, I'm like a survivalist. Red Dawn is one of my favorite movies.
Yeah.
I own a lot of guns. Like, I know that I joined the military because I wanted to like defend my country. I know that if my country was invaded, I would be, insurgent number one. I'd be the first guy out there shooting that.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh man. So that really started bothering me. Thankfully, the rest of the deployment went down, fairly uneventfully.
Yeah.
Lots of missions. We never really took any fire or anything serious.
What did you just have one? How many deployments did you have during your time? How long were you in the service for?
So I'll get to that.
Okay.
So, because that's actually a big part of my story. So,
fantastic.
Sorry, 1 second here. I gotta.
That's okay.
There's corn stuck in my teeth or something.
Yeah.
Anyway,
happens.
So then we went home, and at this point I was extremely bothered. I was like, I can't keep doing this. I don't believe in what we're doing. I had shifted in a very, very short amount of time, basically from the time I deployed to about 2 months after I got back. So it was only about a 6-month period. So I was only deployed for 4.5 months. I just started thinking, like, man, I basically joined the military because even though I'm a libertarian, I thought that national defense was like the one thing government's supposed to do. It was a necessary evil. And now I just think it's evil. I don't even think it's a necessary evil. And so I was like, am I an anarchist? Like, what is going on here? I was so conflicted. And I was starting to very seriously consider filing for discharge as a conscientious objector. And I was like, I don't believe in this. And I was at first thinking about filing, I was debating, should I file for discharge or should I file to change my MOS and become a 68 whiskey and be a medic? I was like, I think I could at least be okay with doing that, because I'm like, man, I joined thinking I was going to get fight bad guys. And that was apparently super naive, because that's not what we're doing. And actually, I should go back. This really started happening on my deployment, because I remember like one time my FSNCO, he's basically my squad leader, the fire support equivalent of a squad leader. He'd be quizzing me and my fellow private who shared a bunk with me about what would you do in this situation? How do you call for fire? How do you call a 9-line medevac? Stuff like that. And I remember one time he asked us, like, if 2 terrorists ran into a building and had a machine gun nest and there were 30 civilians in there, would you call for fire on it if the lieutenant ordered you to? I was like, no. And he was like, at first, like, oh, no, it's okay. And he tried to explain to me and I've heard from some people that I've talked to since, and I talked to some Air Force guy, and he was like, he thought I was lying about this story, because he was like, that's not what a civilian death estimate is. And I was like, I mean, if this guy was wrong about what he was saying, he was teaching me the rules of engagement wrong. It wasn't that I'm lying about this. But he told me the civilian death estimate at the time was 34. He said, what that means is that you can kill up to 34 civilians without, is to take out one insurgent and one hostile, and it's okay. So he's like, so the answer is yes, you would call for fire. And I was like, no, I wouldn't. I was like, why would I kill 30 civilians? He's like, well, to save Rangers. I'm like, yeah. I thought the whole point was that we joined to fight this fight to liberate the oppressed people of Iraq. I was like, we should risk our lives to take if a few of us die, it's better than 30 dying. And after that, it became, for a couple of days after that, I got so much grief from everybody. They'd be like, oh, what, you're not going to protect me? I'd kill a Hodge to protect you. And I was like, I wouldn't kill an innocent one to protect you, and I hope you wouldn't kill an innocent one to protect me. Yeah. And, other team leaders and squad leaders would bring their privates by my bunk and be like, see West private, he doesn't have your back. And I'm like, oh my God. But it's like they were trying to like bully me, and I'm just like, so
to the chat real quick. Tim Paleo Libertarian put out, can it be that because the U.S. government misinforms our citizens to hate the people of other countries, that causes the people of those countries to hate the U.S. when they come across the misinformed.
100%. I mean, yeah, it's. I don't know if he's asking that context in the context of like actual like people in Iraq, insurgents who might hate us enough to want.
I'm going to assume he is.
Yeah, I mean that's just textbook blowback. That's
exactly. And that's actually what that was like. That clip I talked about. That was your thing was talking about blowback. Yeah.
So
that was the introduction to you. Yeah. So solid point. Yeah.
So I'm almost getting to the end of my time in the military. Sorry if I'm going on too long about
No. This is the whole reason we brought you on was to tell your story, man. It's great.
So here's what happened. I was debating for probably 2 months after I got back from Iraq. I was like, I can't keep doing this. I was like, maybe I should just try to, but I felt weird. I was like, I'm not a pacifist. How would I be a conscientious objector? I was like, maybe I should just try to. There's a certain kind of conscientious objection where you just say, hey, I can't do this combat arms MOS. Can you move me to a different job? And I was going to try to become a medic. I was really seriously considering that. And then, but then at times I'd be like, man, do I even want to help the military at all? Do I even want to collect a government paycheck at this point? Because I just felt so bad about everything. And then there was like one moment that just absolutely crystallized it for me. And I was like, that's it. I'm getting out. I can't do this. We all got called for a formation. And I think it was like a weekend. So I thought it was like just a normal, release formation where they're going to give us a safety brief. And our company commander, a piece of shit named Victor Satterland, who I'm ashamed to say is actually an Oregonian. He's from Salem. He said, I just wanted to let everybody know the 13-year-old who killed Corporal McGee. This was the corporal who died in Tikrit like 2 days after I got to Mosul, and whose death had motivated us all for much of the deployment. He says the 13-year-old who killed Corporal McGee just got released from prison, and everybody gasps. How did he say it? I have this actually written down somewhere. I haven't looked at it in a long time because I went home and wrote it down. I was like, I'm never going to forget exactly what he said. But he basically said the 13-year-old who shot Corporal McGee with an SKS, I don't know why he shared so many details, but he did, just got released from prison. That's the Iraqi justice system for you. And everyone's just angry. And I'm sitting there shocked by the revelation. Like, how did I not know that this guy was killed by a 13-year-old kid? Mm-hmm. And then he says, but that's okay, because next deployment, we're going to go to Iraq and get revenge when we put all the fucking Muslims to sleep. And everyone's like, yeah, cheer. I'm just like, oh my God, I'm like, I got to get out of here. I can't do this. Yeah. And so, because they're all thinking that, they're all hating this kid. And all I can think is, I own an SKS. I have a 13-year-old brother that I taught to shoot. Like literally, I had a brother at that time was 13, and I'm thinking, we weren't even there going after this 13-year-old kid. There's no way. We were going after his dad or his uncle or his brother, or hell, maybe he was just a random accidental target that got hit. I'm thinking, this kid is a damn hero defending his family against invaders. I hope that if my house got invaded, my 13-year-old brother would grab my SKS and shoot him. And that just made it so real for me. I was like, holy crap, I'm fighting me. I'm fighting people like myself in Iraq. And that was when I realized I have to get out as a conscientious objector. So it was only a couple of weeks after that. I did some more research. I tried to get in touch with some like GI rights hotlines that were completely useless. They basically never got back to me. And I think part of it was that those tend to be very like liberally oriented. And so when I, kind of tell them my objections, they wouldn't want to talk to me anymore. It was very, very strange. But yeah, long story short, I applied for discharge as a conscientious objector. The military had no idea what to do with me because I don't think a single Ranger had done it since like 1983. Mm-hmm. And none of them got it because I was like one of the most openly I was like one of the most open gun nuts. I was the guy that was always into guns. Yeah. I always talked about how I carried a gun. And they were like, well, you're not a pacifist. What is this? You just can't hack it. I'm like, no, you're right. I'm not a pacifist. I would defend myself. I would fight invaders. I can't in good conscience fight a war for the government.
Yeah.
They'd be like, well, would you have fought in World War II? I'm like, honestly, no. I mean, if I was Polish, yeah, I would have fought Nazis invading my country.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't have joined the government because I would have thought I was going over to fight Nazis. Then we would have firebombed Dresden and murdered a bunch of people. So I just became super.
Well, and sorry, just to like bounce off of from the chat, just so I don't like skip out on any of these like comments people want. To like your point when you were talking about that commander that said, you know, like we're going to put the Muslims to sleep, and from Tim was saying, people like that just don't actually know any Muslims in their life, and I do feel like kind of to possibly build upon his point, and I'm sure Tim would agree that I do feel like a lot of these people who say some things like that, and this is something for even me, like where I wasn't in like a lot of the same situations as you, you had a way more intense experience than I did, but like, the military did kind of try to push this separation of like perception and reality, because if you could see these people as people, you might have a harder time shooting this person. And I do feel like that's something that was kind of like the whole, I called people, and I'm not proud of it, but, I remember my tour overseas, I called people Haji all the time. That's just,
me too.
Yeah, it's just what it was kind of ingrained in your head. I mean, like in your head, you go back to like fucking Vietnam, we're calling Gooks and Charlie and shit like that, Go back to World War II, or calling them like Krauts and shit like that, like you kind of, we get these, and that's something the military is actually really good about doing.
It's not just the military though. That happens in this country too. Like
with the police,
with segregation, and slavery before that, and with the whole build the wall, make America great kind of fervor that people have about Hispanics that live in fucking like Indiana or something, or some place like Illinois or whatever, and they're trying to make decisions for people that live in border states that actually work among those people, and anyways, I'm just saying.
No, and that's,
I think it's human nature.
No, yeah, and that's a great point.
Control tactic. It's a way to control a population by
tribalism.
Making.
Yes, and it becomes easier too, though. It's easier to say these people are the enemy if you can kind of put in these things that make them seem less than human, where you can have these nicknames for them, and like you don't even you don't call them a person, you call them a Haji, or you call them a wetback or something, like it.
Right.
It becomes easier.
Yeah, and it's really sad, and I know why it happens, because you couldn't fight wars like this without that. Because I mean, I'm far from the only guy in the military. Most of the guys are in the military. Certainly, most of the guys who are Rangers would be exactly the kind of people who'd be an insurgent if their country was invaded.
Yeah.
You need this like level of like distance between them.
Yeah.
So that they can feel okay fighting these people and not realize they're just fighting, a brown Middle Eastern version of themselves.
Yeah, exactly. And then, like as Tim says from the chat, the more you divide people, the easier they are to control.
Exactly.
So when you're able to kind of push these divisions amongst people, you as a government actually can step in and control people much easier, because you have these like people are dividing themselves upon classes, upon races, upon genders, and what have you, and that's a little like more of a broad topic, but I do feel like that's a very, good point. Like the more we push these divisions amongst ourselves just as people, we kind of forget that, like, hey, you're a person, not just a specific race, not a specific gender, not a specific religion. You're a person, and we stop seeing that and, who we disagree with.
Yeah. Yeah. So just kind of get back to my story. 3 or 4 months, I think it was, probably about 3 months after I got back from Iraq, I applied for discharge as a conscientious objector.
Mm-hmm.
They had no idea how to handle it. The process should have, according to military regulations, it should have taken them about 90 days to make a decision. And then, however long, 30 days to out process me, 60 days, whatever. It shouldn't have been should have been maybe 3, 4, 5 months. It took 13 months from that point for me to get out of the military.
Oh,
they just stonewalled. They basically turned me into, dedicated CQ duty and janitorial duty guy. Spent most of the next year just ferrying around drunk rangers on the weekends, which probably the most fun thing I ever did in the military.
I can imagine, yeah.
But yeah, and the interesting thing, and I mean, that it was just, I won't get too much into that, but it was obnoxious. Like they have to have another, it's a whole process. I mean, I had to write a huge application packet. I had to write out all my beliefs. I had to be interviewed by an officer from outside of my chain of command who then said, yes, he is sincere in his beliefs. He's not making this up. And then he recommended they give me the discharge. And then it went up and up and up. And then it finally ended up sitting on the post general who, I mean, the post general has nothing to do with me. He's only like in my chain of command officially. It's not like he's even in my battalion to where I've even ever seen him face to face.
Yeah.
He sat on his desk for like 3 months. And I was like, that motherfucker is not signing this because he doesn't want someone from his unit or his base defecting. So I actually made the mistake of writing to a congressman. Well, unfortunately, Congressman,
the Army does not like when you do that.
No, they didn't. But that's what I found online was like my only real option. Well, I wrote to Congressman Greg Walden, who's a gross war hawk Republican who represents Oregon's 2nd congressional district, which is basically all of southern and eastern Oregon. And about a week and a half after I wrote and sent him a letter, so probably a few days after he would have received the letter, I got notification that my application for discharge as a conscience objector was denied. So then denied. So I don't know, but I think that Greg Walden was like, I don't want to have a conscience objector in my district.
And then Tim from the chat says that it sounds like a lot of what they were putting you through was just punishment for not falling in line.
That's exactly what it was. And I know why they do it, because I was not the only person that felt this way.
Oh, of course
I was just the only person I was probably, of all the people who felt this way, I was probably the one with the most like fundamentalist religious upbringing and the most like convictions trained into me. And honestly, probably just the most dominant personality in general.
I would say it sounds like you were probably out of any of those people like the one kind of most passionate about how you felt.
I hate saying it, but probably also the most, I was legitimately the most intelligent. And I actually know that for a fact because
it sounds like it. Don't feel bad saying that.
It sounds arrogant, but it's actually really funny. This is a tangent, but when we were redeploying from Iraq, they were like, West, you're smart. You can do the paperwork. So they gave me the paperwork to make sure that everybody did all their redeployment checklist, medical checkups and stuff.
Yep.
And so I actually had access to everybody's paperwork that showed their GT scores. The general technical part of the ASVAB, you're supposed to have at least a 110 to be a ranger. I think the highest you can have is a 135. I had a 132. And I was the highest in my platoon. The second, there was one guy, and I was like, oh, why am I not surprised he's the other smart guy? The guy I actually enjoy talking with. Had like a 130. And then most of the amazing thing was that you're supposed to have at least a 110. 3 of our 4 squad leaders, so the E6s in our platoon, didn't meet that. We had one that had a 125, and all the others were like 103, 108, 105. Oh my God, I'm with retards. No wonder there was such an idiot. Like there's even one guy that he wasn't a squad leader, but he was probably the private that the leadership loved the most because he was just like a gung-ho follow orders idiot. He had like a 95, and I was like, this makes so much sense. Anyway, just kind of an aside. I hate saying it, but I was like basically objectively the smartest person in the room at that point.
You got proof, it sounds like.
Exactly.
It's fine to say.
But what happened was after I applied for discharge, so many people would like shake their heads at me and disapprove and, show their privates, don't be like him. I had probably 10 or 12 people throughout the next year come up to me privately and be like, hey, I really respect what you're doing. I can't wait to get out. And they're like, they were just going to bide their time, not rock the boat. But I was not the only person.
Well, and that's
which is why they try to silence you, probably. Why they try to reject you and everything.
There are a lot of people. Me in the Army, I was a rock the boat person a couple times, and I got hit hard for it. Like they did not like it when you do that. They do not like people who rock the boat, and they actively discourage that as much as they possibly can.
Of course, because they want obedience and compliance, right?
That's how the military works.
Yeah. And they did all kinds of stupid stuff. Like one time, my platoon leader gave me permission to go visit a buddy. I flew out to visit one of my good friends on a weekend. And then our company commander, for some reason, volunteered our company for CQ duty that weekend. And so, no, not CQ duty. They volunteered us for to be on, how do they even call it? To be on alert. We all had to stay within 2 hours of Fort Benning. Yeah. And I was like, I already got approval for this. And my leadership was like, just go, it's fine. Well, then my flight got delayed coming back. And so I got back. I got back to the recall formation a little bit late. So then, even though they give me permission, they're like, well, they didn't like me at this point. So they gave me an Article 15. And I mean, just like stupid stuff. Like they're just screwing with me.
That's shitty. There's no reason for that.
Yeah. And I'm like, I literally had like signed permission for this. And then you guys just like revoked it. But we're like,
real quick, for our followers, though, who don't know what an Article 15 is, can you...
Article 15 is non-judicial punishment. So it's like, when people think of like getting in trouble in the military, they always think of court-martial. Court-martial is basically like a felony. It's like you're in real trouble.
For Article 15, they'll typically like demote you or
Article 15,
put you in extra duty.
It's like a demotion. I mean, they did everything they could to me because they didn't like me at this point. So they demoted me to a fuzzy private, and they took half a month's pay, restricted me to the barracks for 60 days. It was almost like prison.
Did you do extra duty too? Like
oh yeah, extra duty.
They love their extra duty, man. Freaking military.
So, and I was already basically doing extra duty because it was like I just got CQ duty every weekend practically.
So crappy.
Just because. Anyway, so I had a lot of people come out of the woodwork and just be like, hey, I respect what you're doing. And it's really funny to see like how much peer pressure there really is in the military. Like even one time we were out doing and this was actually before I applied for discharge as a conscious objector. It was like right after our deployment when we first just started gearing up for our next deployment cycle training. We were doing a like radio operator, because of the 13 Fox radio operations, a big part of the job. A radio operator land nav course. It was actually fun. There was just like a dozen of us.
Land nav is fun. I loved land nav.
Oh yeah, me too. And I grew up backpacking, so I love it.
Yeah.
So we were out on this course, and we literally just had a campfire and we're just bullshitting at night, hanging out around the fire. And so some guys started passing around like a phone with like some naked pictures of one of his conquests on it, and they're all, oh dude, she's so hot. And it gets to me, and I was like, oh, I'm good. I don't really look at porn, and. So, and I just let him like pass it to the next guy. It passed me. Everyone laughs and makes fun of me. Like, what, are you gay? I'm like,
yep.
I'm like, you guys are so stupid. And what was really funny was even aside from like these guys are so afraid to stand up for their own convictions. Later, one of the guys came up to me and was like, hey, I'm really sorry I laughed at you back there. And I was like, I'm not offended. I just kind of rolled my eyes at you guys. He's like, honestly, like I'm a Christian. I don't really think it's right either, but I just did it. And he's like, I really respect it.
Because you get ostracized and made fun of. You feel like you can't not just go with the flow.
And exactly. Like, and it's and there was already an element of like it was really easy for people to jump to, because no one before I applied as a conscious objector, nobody really disliked me. I was fairly well liked by people. But they were always a little bit like, because I didn't drink, I didn't party, I didn't do any of that stuff. I basically just hung out with myself on the weekends and went and watched movies. Because it's like, what am I going to do? I hang out with a bunch of drunk rangers? That sounds terrible. But anyway, so long story short, as I keep saying. But
you're doing good, man. Don't worry about it.
Finally, after like 9 or 10 months of just getting jerked around, because after my packet got denied by the base general, I then had to write a huge like rebuttal and write that's because you can appeal it. So I appealed it, and then it went off to wherever else and was again just sitting there. We ended up getting a new first sergeant, and after like a month of him being at the company, he came up to me. He's like, West, what's your deal? What's going on with you? Like, I don't really understand why you're here and why you're doing all this extra duty and stuff. And I explained to him everything, and he was like, okay, because he knew I was a conscious objector, but like no one really, so many people didn't know me, like, and didn't really know what I was doing. And then so many rumors would like go around. Like, for example, my last name is West. Mm-hmm. There was a guy whose last name was Webb who got kicked out of the unit and kicked out of the army for getting caught in Iraq stealing a bunch of like women's panties from the laundry, from like the big army laundry facility. Jesus. Away from our base. And then they caught him on security camera. And when they found him in his room, he had, I'm not even making this up, he had a can of Barbasol up his ass and was masturbating to gay porn.
That's so fucking weird.
And so they kicked him out of the army. Well, and he pissed positive for meth.
Sounds right. If from the other part of the story, yeah, I
right.
get it.
So his name was Webb, mine was West. I cannot tell you how many people I had to explain. No, I'm not Webb. I'm the guy who is turned into an anti-government radical. And they're like, oh, okay, that's cool. You know, whatever. Yeah. So my point is, like, so many people just didn't understand. Even the first sergeant was like, what is this guy's deal? What's going on? And when I kind of told him my deal, I actually had a lot of respect for him, because he was like, you know what, to be honest, it's like, I disagree with you on some stuff, but I'm pretty sick of this war too. I'm sick of seeing my men die in it. I think it's pretty messed up that they're jerking you around. And the first sergeant, I don't know what exactly he did, but he helped expedite the process. He's like, I'm going to help you get out of here. And he basically went and told him, like, guys, this is ridiculous. What are you doing to this guy? Mm-hmm. This guy's not doing anything wrong. This guy's harmless. I mean, because there were like people that like wanted to basically have me investigated as a potential terrorist. It was weird.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
And I was really glad he did that, because I had set myself a deadline. I was like, at this point, when he did that, it was probably September 2011 or 2010. So I was like, if I'm not out of here by New Year's, I'm just going to go AWOL. I don't even care anymore.
Yeah.
And I don't care if I have to be on the run for the next decade of my life or whatever. I don't care. I'm not wasting my life here. It was just miserable. Mm. I ended up getting out of the military like that December, like a week and a half before Christmas. Drove across the country in my Jeep, and that was it. But total, it was like over 13 months that it took for me to get out, when it should have been it should have been 3 to 5 tops.
What was your total time in the military then?
My total time in the military was just under 3 years. I basically just didn't serve the last year and a couple months of my contract.
No, for me, I was supposed to ETS at 4 years. I got stop lossed, but I had back problems, so I couldn't deploy. I had like a bulging disc and all this shit. So they wouldn't let me deploy, and then they sent me to a different part of the unit, and then they stop lost me there too, because they were deploying, but I still couldn't deploy, so they had to send me to another unit. I spent about a year and like 3 or 4 months past when I was supposed to ETS doing absolutely nothing, because I physically couldn't take a PT test. I couldn't go to a range. I couldn't do anything that the Army has you do. But they wouldn't take the stop losses off, even though I wasn't even in those units anymore. It was insane. The Army does some stupid shit.
They really do.
Yeah, it's insane. But I mean, that's rough. It sounds like you had a real rough, just that they would drag stuff like that out for so long. So I do want to say, because you kind of you threw us out some different examples, but during your time in the Army, if you kind of had to maybe specifically point out one incident that would kind of like give you your epiphany of what am I doing here?
That's easy. It's absolutely the revelation that the corporal in our company who got killed was killed by a 13-year-old. I mean, just realizing like these are desperate people fighting for their country. I mean, ultimately, that was just an instance that helped me with the realization that if my country was invaded, I'd shoot back too. And that's the simplest way I can put it. I just realized basically, we weren't the good guys. I can't blame anybody for shooting at the U.S. military in the Middle East.
I mean, how can you? I mean,
yeah,
you feel like your life is threatened too.
And where I think a lot of people get very confused is they always, I mean, everything is so, ironically, I would say I'm a very black and white person. But the problem people have is that they're so black and white. But, you know, what they don't realize is that both sides are actually shades of gray. They're not supporting the black or the white. And so many people, you know, Republicans and Democrats, left and right, they think there's only two options and everything. They always think you have to pick a side. So when I say things like, well, I can't really blame them for shooting back at the U.S. military, then they're like, well, what does that mean? You like ISIS? Do you like the Taliban? I'm like, no, maybe everyone's a bad guy. Maybe, you know, I'm sure there's definitely some people, some insurgents that I'm sure are good people in a desperate situation fighting for a good cause. But there's plenty of them that are bad. But if both sides of a war are bad,
yeah,
you know, like I always tell people are like, you know, well, would you have fought for the North or the South? Fuck the North and the South. I would have gone west. I would have gone to the Oregon Territory.
Yeah, you think about it logically, though. There has to be some people that are doing things because it's more they're scared for their life or because they don't feel like they have a choice.
Or you look at a place like, they seem to have some kind of socialist leanings, so I don't necessarily love it. But for the most part, like, what is it? Rojava?
I'm not sure which one.
It's like an area in Syria that's basically like trying to make like a more democratic kind of. I mean, like, as far as that conflict goes, they seem to be the good guys. Yeah, and yet, you know.
Okay. I do have somebody was asking. I'm not sure how much. If you're like a comic book guy at all. If you've ever read or watched shows, somebody asking what your opinion on the Punisher as a character is.
The only comic book I've ever read was Watchmen, and that was because I liked the movie.
You get bonus points for that.
Literally the only comic book I've ever read. So I'm sorry.
Well, are you familiar with the show at all, or like the character?
I'm familiar with it. I've seen some of the movies. I haven't actually watched the show.
Movies aren't great, but the show's good.
Yeah. I've heard the show's good. I've heard the show actually has a lot of this kind of stuff in it. So I'm kind of curious to check it out. My problem is that
it starts in Daredevil. If you want to get the whole story, like you got to watch the second season.
I've only watched the first season of Daredevil. I haven't watched the second one or the Punisher or anything. So
like me and Jason are both big. Like we read comic books and stuff like that. And like I even did a stream where I was showing my comic book collection. Like I got a really massive collection of comic books, and then I read. I don't watch all the shows because there's so many I can't keep up on them. Yeah, it's just like
I watch all the movies, but
so yeah, but no, like Watchmen, that's like top tier, stuff. So that's good that you read that one. Yeah,
I saw the movie and I loved it.
It was one of Zack Snyder's few movies that I feel like
I really liked Zack Snyder for a little while. And then Sucker Punch came out, and I was like, "Oh no! Oh no! Did this guy just accidentally make a great movie?"
Oh, Sucker Punch was terrible. I actually really liked his Dawn of the Dead remake.
Well, that's the other one I'd seen. I was like, "That's pretty good." Watchmen's amazing. 300's all right. I was like, I like this guy, and then everything he's made.
I didn't like 300 as much, but that's just I feel like 300. If you took all the slow motion parts of 300 and just played them at normal speed, the movie would be like it'd be like 6 minutes long.
I have a web series I consider making from time to time, called "It Should Have Been a Short Film," where I take either really boring films or films with tons of slow motion and re-edit them in like a 15-minute short film. I should add 300 to that list. I have like 6 films on it. Every now that I think about doing it.
You probably I have a web comic I do called Cynical Stew. This is the hat I'm wearing is from the web comic. Okay. So I should send you the link to that because we have them archived on the website for the
check it out.
I'm a writer editor for EmpireComicsLive.com, and I'll send you a link sometime. I think you'd actually enjoy it because like the whole idea is like for 5 years, it wasn't until I'm coming up on a year in a couple months where I haven't had to use a cane. But for 5 years of my life, I had to use a cane because, and I was in a wheelchair sometimes, I was using a walker because like my back and my leg were so messed up with like nerve pain and stuff.
Man.
But so I created this character as a way to cope with it. But he's just like a sarcastic asshole. My wife came up with the kind of pun of like the Comic strip name is Cynical Stew, Stew, and then the character's name is Stew, Stu.
Ah, yeah.
My wife came up with that pun because she's a big pun person. But no, I have like a little ash can I put out, which is it's just a little mini book that I can print off on my own. But we have all them like archived on our website where you can go through and read them. Like I have like for October one year, like every comic strip was this like side story of where like I'm a zombie, and there's like one where somebody like breaks my cane so I can't chase him, and then I rip out his spine and I use his spine as a cane. It's fucking awesome stuff. But no, there's just things where like he's just a sarcastic asshole. There's some like cutesy like fun stuff with him and his daughter. We actually used one of the comic strips as a pregnancy announcement when my son was we found out we were having my son. And there's fun stuff like that. But I mean, like, you'd probably enjoy it. What I think you would really enjoy, though, is I have another webcomic I do occasionally called The Veteran Life. And most of it's about my dealings with the VA.
Kind of dark comedy, I'm guessing.
Yeah, well, the very first one is he's like, you don't see what he's looking at, but the character, like, he's just looking real concerned, and he's just like, something's not right. And then his wife is like, oh, hey, you got a package, and he opens it, and it's his medication. He's like, yes, this is just what I needed. And then it pulls back to reveal, like, he's got this giant castle built out of medicine bottles. And he's placing the next one because of like the over medication of veterans. There's things like that. My personal favorite is like the wife is driving, and then she sees like at the dentist, and there's this like mom like trying to pull her kid away from the car, and the kid's like, I don't want to go to the dentist, you can't make me. And she's like, I'm sure glad that's not me. And then the last panel is her pulling her husband from the car, and he's like, I don't want to go to the VA, you can't make me. Yeah, I'll send some of those out to you. I post them occasionally. Yeah, but it's great. Like,
it's funny. I actually never dealt with the VA because I don't know. I became the guy who's like so staunchly like, I hate the government. Yeah. I'm not even gonna go there.
Well, yeah, for me, because like actually part of the reason I got out was because of like I have like had some severe.
Oh no, yeah, I don't blame you at all.
And like, well, it's just kind of like I had to go, and I go there for like my mental health stuff too, and I have like a lot of like really bad sleep issues that still haven't gotten figured out. But I had my discs fused, like 2 of my spinal discs fused last February, and
that's rough.
Like the whole story there though, like. And I'll give you kind of the abridged version is basically I was in so much pain I couldn't lay down, I couldn't sit down, I couldn't stand up. I was in this weird hunched over position on the couch, and that was the only way I could like not be in pain. I couldn't get up to go to the bathroom, so I was like pissing in this little plastic urinal my wife got for me. So she had enough, and then it was a Saturday. She took me to the VA, and they wanted me to go home and wait it out until Monday, just to see if I might be able to schedule an MRI at some point in the future. And I was in so much pain, I was actually to the point of like physically hurting myself to try to distract from the pain. And we went to the VA, and they didn't ask me any mental health questions, which they're required to by law. They wouldn't give me an IV, and I was like severely dehydrated. It was a 5.5 hour like hostage negotiation. And my wife was like, I am not leaving until you do something for my husband. Like, cause my wife's like hardcore when it comes to the VA. She doesn't give a fuck. She's going to like stand up to them. And then eventually we got an ER transfer put in, and we went to the civilian hospital, and they were like, took some questions, and they're like, are you suicidal? And I was like, I am not in this moment, but I'm losing hope incredibly fast. Now I'm to leave like another day or two, and I probably would have ended up killing myself because it was insane how much pain I was in. And then they're like, better
now, I hope.
Oh yeah. No, they put me into an MRI that day. And then they're like, oh, holy shit, you need to have surgery right away. They had me in surgery the next day. They, at first they were like, well, we're going to just do a laminectomy, is where they go in and they remove the herniation. And I was like, can we do a spinal fusion? Because the last time you guys did this, last time I had this exact same surgery, I ended up in this situation, but it's even worse. I don't want to just have to go, down. And apparently, like, typically you're supposed to have like 2 or 3 laminectomies under your belt before they'll consider a spinal fusion. But I guess like my situation was so bad that the surgeon was like, yeah, we'll do the spinal fusion. And then they had me in surgery, and then like it was 5 days in and out. and that includes the MRI, the surgery, and like the recovery, like PT stuff. And since then, you know, like a few months down the road, it'll be in like, I think it's about July area, and it'll have in July of this year, it'll been a full year since I haven't had to use a cane.
Wow. That's awesome.
So yeah, had a huge impact. But the VA, you know, and here's what's scary. It wasn't even like I hadn't gotten out of the hospital yet. And my wife found this article, and then you read the article, and it's exactly what I went through. It's the same problem. It's the same, like the VA wanted him to wait it out. Same exact thing. The only difference is they were brand new to the VA and didn't really understand like what their rights were as much as like my wife did. And he ended up killing himself. He couldn't take the pain anymore. It was too much. He ended it. And, you know, I was just like, I read that and I'm just like, you know, like that could have been me so easily, you know. I'm like, I was lucky to have my wife. If it wasn't for my wife, I 100% believe I wouldn't be here right now. I wouldn't have been able to fight for myself the way she fought for me. You know, and like, if it wasn't for her and it wasn't for her like tenacity and that whole situation of just like, she scared them, you know. She was like, I am not leaving this place until you do something for my husband. And it was just like, you know, the VA, like having somebody say, I'm not leaving, like they're not used to dealing with that because everyone wants to get the fuck out of there. But, you know, I've done like plenty of streams talking about that, but yeah, it was rough, you know. And, but yeah, like, I mean, I'm not 100%, you know, I have pain all the time still. You know, it's more controllable with medication, but yes, from the chat, my wife is awesome. She's amazing. Like if you want, like I have never seen somebody like become so aggressive on my behalf as my wife would with the VA. Like she just flat out, like she has snapped on some people before. She's fucking cool. I like her a lot. You know, I'm so glad I'm so glad like I was this lucky to find somebody like that. And this is something too I've even said, like, because I'm trying to do like every Friday or Saturday now. We had our first one yesterday of doing mental health streams where I talk about mental health problems. Oh, that's awesome. And part of that's because I do like facilitating for mental health groups and stuff like that. And, you know, my wife is actually a mental health therapist. She's a marriage and family therapist. You know, she's got her bachelor's in psychology and philosophy and her major in marriage and family therapy, you know, and like she's a very smart person. And she's actually agreed to like possibly come on some of the streams in the future. Nice. But yeah, for me, like my whole problem, like you know, like I could spend days talking about just how the VA has fucked me over so much. But you know, I have some good experiences too. But and it's rough. It sucks because there's people like you know, have gone. The government's like, hey, here, go overseas. We're going to put you in these horrific situations that are going to mentally scar you. And then we're going to bring you home and we're not going to do a damn thing to help you out.
Yeah, we're going to do the crappiest treatment possible.
Exactly. It sucks. It sucks for them.
That's like someone asked, Paleo Libertarian, question for both of you. What do you think the U.S. military should look like now? I would say, like, you know, ideally just non-existent. But like realistically, dude, just bring them back. Downsize, and cut the budget, and just help the guys that you screwed over. I would want to say
that kind of leads me into something I want to ask you, but real quick, I would dive in of like very minimalist for our military. I feel like a lot of it should be more like we should be more concerned about like our home first and direct threats, not like getting involved in so much, because so much of our problems we have overseas are problems that we created ourselves. Like how many times have we had to go fight a terrorist organization that started from us funding them?
Right.
You know? So, but that leads me into a question I want to ask you, Dave. David, how do you?
I actually usually go just by David.
So. Okay. I have a tendency to like accidentally like shorten people's names, and I don't mean to because I know some people. Yeah. So David, so for you, your kind of ideology, would you consider yourself more like anarcho-capitalist? Would you consider yourself more like minarchist? How would you describe yourself?
I'm pretty much a just stone cold anarcho-capitalist. Like,
okay.
party line anarcho-capitalist.
Yeah. For me, and Jason's actually said that like he feels like it's a good description. Is I always call myself a minarchist with
my wife is
with ANCOM sorry, not ANCOM. Geez, fuck those guys. with ANCAP tendencies, because I feel like they have some very, I'm like, ANCAPs have some very solid ideas, and there are a lot of things I heavily agree with them on. I have some like more, and it's probably just a lot of my conservative upbringing, and like I'm not against the ANCAP ideology at all, really. Well, and I've argued on behalf of them so many times. But go ahead.
Well, that's the thing I was going to say. I mean, I'm also what I often call myself an anarcho-pessimist.
That's good. I like it.
I'm I've had this discussion with Adam Kokesh quite a few times, actually.
I love Kokesh.
I'm a big fan.
He was my introduction into libertarianism. Like Jason kind of like got some of that stuff rolling. He was some of the first people I started watching on YouTube, and at that point in my life, I was like, there's some stuff he's a little too extreme for me, but like he did get me thinking a lot. Even if I didn't agree, he got me thinking.
Right. No, that's exactly. I mean, I basically realized, oh my gosh, am I an anarchist? And then I started searching things. I started searching things on YouTube, all sorts of things like Second American Revolution, anarchism. And like and finally I started finding like anarcho-capitalists, because I was like, I feel like I'm an anarchist now. And then I found anarcho-capitalists, and specifically I found some like Adam Kokesh speeches. He wasn't quite as active then as he was in later years. This was back in like 2009, but I was like, oh, this is really cool. That was actually the John Bolton thing that I did. I went to DC for the Veterans for Ron Paul March that he organized in 2012. Nice. Happened to be the same weekend as the Students for Liberty event, so I went to that too, and that's where I happened to confront Bolton.
Yeah, but, I felt it. That's like my favorite clip. I'm gonna make sure I put that out there for. I posted it earlier today, but like seriously, that was my introduction to you as a person. And I'm like, I like this guy. I like what he's got to say.
Well, thank you. What I was gonna say though is I've actually had this discussion. I've hung out with Kokesh quite a few times. We're kind of friends at this point. Nice. And I've had this discussion with him several times, because he's the guy that's really big into like, you know what, the state's dying. 200 years from now, it'll be gone. People will be peaceful. And I'm like, I wish. So I call myself an anarcho-pessimist, because I'm like, the government's never going away. It's evil, and I will never support anything it does. But it's never going away. And I definitely probably attribute some of that to me being like a Christian.
Yeah.
Being a theistic libertarian.
Yeah. I feel like for me, where I say like when I'm a minarchist with ANCAP tendencies, is that I feel like I would agree that I'm not entirely sure that the government can go away, but I feel like we can minimize their impact on the world as much as possible.
Right. And some ANCAPs like hate minarchists and act like they're giant hypocrites. I like to get along with people and agree with what we agree on. I try to. What I've found is that most of the time, there's some people that will like say they're a minarchist, and then you talk to them and you're like, dude, you're just like a Republican. What are you even calling it?
They're quite like, they call them conservatarians. Some of them call themselves,
Right. But people who are genuinely a minarchist, which I definitely get the sense that you are. I mean, my wife is not an anarchist. She's very much more of a minarchist libertarian.
Yeah.
And she's very much a libertarian. I mean, she's like actually like been involved in the liberty movement. We knew like all sorts of the same people. It's how we totally hit it off in the first place. Some people will be like, I hate minarchists almost more than like statists. And I'm like, oh my gosh, guys, like if we could get to the minarchist ideal, oh, what a great time it would be. Like,
and that's my thing.
And then we can talk about anarchy.
And I'm like, dude, if we can get to like the whole minarchist concept, and we feel like we can like go into an ANCAP society, like I wouldn't actually be like 100% against trying. Like, let's see what we can do. But it like. Well, what a lot of minarchists like to argue, and it's not something I try to argue exactly, but I would tend to agree with, is that like, can we really get to an ANCAP society without going the minarchist route first? That's debatable, but I feel like that's a lot of like the argument a lot of minarchists like to make. And then for you, like David, what would you say?
I don't think we could ever get to anarcho-capitalism beyond very small regional stuff, and for a limited number of time. And again, like I contribute that largely to me being like a theistic libertarian. I just believe that people are fallen People are evil. Someone's always going to try to exert control. All we can really do is fight that. So to me, anything we can get that moves us more towards liberty is a win. And so, yeah, I would say that definitely if we could ever establish like a more or less anarcho-capitalistic society, and that's the other thing, even if we did establish an anarchic society, it wouldn't be perfect. And there would be problems.
No, that's actually something I brought up on because we were talking about like Jesus Christ, like I had this like ridiculous debate going on with ANCOMs, and just like that's just such a fucking headache. But
they're the worst.
Yeah, they are just the absolute worst.
It's funny because like sometimes, sorry to catch up, but sometimes I'm like, well, if you want to have a commune, fine, but inevitably they don't want to just do that.
Yeah. Here's my thing too is I said like, okay, and like I'm arguing this position. I'm not even an ANCAP, but I'm like, okay, here's my big issue with ANCOMs is in an anarcho-capitalist society, ANCOMs could exist. They get to go off in their own little communes.
Right.
They can just have their own little, like I feel like it's probably going to fucking fail, but you get to go off. You get to do your own little thing. But then in the ANCOM society, ANCAPs don't get to exist. You have to conform to the ANCOM ideology. And I'm like, how can you call yourself an anarchist when you're not allowing people to be who they want to be?
And then they're always like, how can you call yourself an anarchist when you're a capitalist? I'm like, sorry, I think people should be able to trade freely.
Right,
I don't necessarily have anything against like a semi-socialistic commune. I mean, it's not something I would want to do with very many people, but one of my dreams is someday to have a huge ranch, big enough to have a 1,000-yard shooting range on, and invite some of my brothers, some of my best friends, come build a house out here, and we'll share property. And I mean, granted, it wouldn't be very communistic. We'd all still, but I mean, I don't mind stuff like that. With the right people, I'm all for sharing and getting along and cooperating.
Well, and that's like I said too, is like, and Jason has said this before, like when we're having it, like ANCOM can possibly work on like a small, like local community scale. It cannot work on the grand scale that they kind of talk about. I believe, and Jason, correct me if I'm wrong, that's kind of what you had said before.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it can work. It can work locally. I don't even know if it would work really on a like a village level maybe, but or a small town possibly. But
I think it could work on basically a familial level. Be that your actual born family.
I would agree. I would agree with that.
I mean, you can have a commune. I mean, communes exist now, so you can have that if that's what you're into. But like, you can't as soon as you get into the whole owning property is. Somebody, the collective cannot collectively own the property, and then all of a sudden nobody can own property. It's like a total contradiction. It doesn't even make sense.
Right.
Yeah. Well, and here's something I was bringing up too when on one of our previous live streams where we were talking about ANCOMs, and I was like, because they have this very firm rent is theft. If you were a landlord, you were taking advantage of somebody, you were exploiting them, and here's my thing is like, okay. Because they're like, you can't own land that you aren't using. And I'm like, okay, let's say this is your scenario you're setting up. But for me specifically, and I have a very unique situation I'm talking about here, where me and my wife, we had just gotten married, and then I got a job offer, a great job offer with great pay, but it was 3 hours away from where we were living. Now, my wife couldn't go with me because she was still finishing up her graduate school or undergrad, so she couldn't come with me. So for a few months we had to live apart because like passing up this job was just like I couldn't just pass it up. It was too good of an opportunity. So I had to go to this town, and I'm trying to find a place because like obviously I'm not gonna fucking buy a house. Like it would be insane. We couldn't afford it because we still had to pay for the rent on where my wife was living. I got where I was stayed at for I don't know, it was like 6 months maybe. They called it a cottage, and what it was a garage that was converted into a small living space. You'd walk in the front door, and there was your living room connected to the kitchen where you had your fridge and your stove and your sink, and then next to that was a little bedroom and then a little bathroom with a shower. And It was fully furnished. You know, there was already a bed, there was already a couch, there was everything you would need. It was all fully furnished, and then it was cheap because it was a really tiny living space.
Right.
And it was a temporary thing, and this was on the property of the people who owned it. Like, you know, this was their old garage. You know, like I lived there. I didn't have to mow the lawn. I didn't have to pay. I only paid for like one utility. You know, and I was like, if it wasn't for that, I would have been I wouldn't have been able to take that job. I just flat out wouldn't have been able to take that job.
It was a very convenient service for you.
It was mutually beneficial because these people got to rent out a space that they just weren't using, and it was still on their property. You cannot be like, well, they're not using it, so they didn't have a right to it. I'm like, well, it was on their land. Like, it was literally like feet, you know, like a little like yard distance away from the house. Like, I could see their house from my window, you know, like it was right there. My driveway was the, like, you know, like the pavement that used to lead up to the garage, you know, like that was my driveway. Like, it was an old garage. And here's the thing too, is like people might like hear that story and they're like, wow, that sounds crazy. That can't be that common. I know at least 2 other people in my life that have actually lived in the exact same, like, it is not uncommon for people to have a separate garage, turn it into like a small cottage, and rent it out for additional income.
So my wife and I, we just moved from Medford, Oregon to Klamath Falls, Oregon about 6 months ago, and bought a house. We moved because Medford's been inundated by Californians and it's gotten so expensive there. The place we moved, we were able to get a 2,500 square foot house for the price of like an 1,100 square foot house in the old place. And we bought a place specifically with the intention of doing that. We found a place that has an awesome private apartment above the garage with its own bathroom, totally separate from the house. And we're working on kind of renovating it. And this summer, we're going to start Airbnb-ing it. And it'll be a very mutually beneficial thing. Someone will have a place to stay and we'll make extra money. I mean, it's great.
And it's like, it's still your property too. Like, and that's what's insane is like, because they like to throw out these scenarios. And I feel like the whole cottage thing is a scenario where like, they don't even consider that, like, you know, like, okay, for me, I was so gracious to those people because if it wasn't for them, I wouldn't have been able to take that job, just flat out. I couldn't have done it. I couldn't do a 3-hour one-way commute every single day.
Oh, yeah.
It would just, there's no way it was happening. You know, that would have been my entire life. And then also, like, they were so nice about it. Like, they were just so nice people. That was the only thing they were renting out to. Yep. And, like, when my wife came, you know, she graduated and we started renting a house. And then I wasn't staying in that garage anymore. And then they started renovating it. And I was like, hey, I feel uncomfortable paying rent if, like, even if I wanted to stay there, I couldn't because you're renovating it. And they were like, makes sense. We'll you know, we'll let you out of your lease and give you your security deposit. You're good to go. The nicest people ever. And then, like, for like an ANCOM to be like, they were exploiting you. I'm like, no, if it wasn't for them, I wouldn't have been able to succeed where I was at in life.
I think there is a tiny grain of truth. Actually, not even a tiny. It's a fairly big grain of truth to what the ANCOMs are saying. But they go about it in the entirely wrong way. Because as an anarcho-capitalist, I don't believe that absentee property rights are, you know, indefinite and absolute. And so what I mean by that is, like, you know, if you subscribe to the Murray Rothbard theory of how property rights are developed, it's basically you mix your labor with something or you trade with the person who initially mixed their labor with it. You know, homesteading. So you think of someone like Ted Turner. He's a billionaire who, you know, he owns, I think, tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands. I think he's the biggest property owner in America. At least he was years ago. He owns, you know, 50,000 acres in Montana or something. Well, how did he actually get that land? Did he go out? Is he utilizing it? Is he running cattle on it? Did he plant a farm? No, somehow that land got deeded by the government and then somehow he got it. So I would argue that it's in a truly free society, it wouldn't be like, he wouldn't just have an absolute right to 50,000 acres just because he has a government sponsored deed to it. If some hobo goes and builds a little cabin in some remote corner of the land that he's never set foot on and plants a cornfield there and starts farming, that guy has more right to that than he does. So, you know, if you are actively ranching land, you're actively utilizing, you're actively farming it, like you're mixing your labor with it, but like you can't just expect, oh, you know, my grandpa ranched that once upon a time and now I've inherited it and I've never touched it again and it's just sitting there. You know, I get that's the way the current system is, but in a free civilization, if you have essentially abandoned property, it becomes free to claim.
Well, I feel too like something you were bringing up even was like, you know, with somebody like Ted Turner, there's a lot of government involved.
Well, exactly. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. And, but like for me, you know, cause I'm like, they paint this portrayal, and I don't want to get too far in the comms because like I beat this one to death, but, sorry, I got really close to the mic. But like they paint this picture that like all landlords are just these like fat cats sitting back on their ass all day counting their millions. And I'm like, have you ever actually talked to just a regular landlord? They typically own multiple properties and all of their time is invested in maintaining those properties. They pay the property tax. They typically pay at least one utility and they are responsible for maintaining that property. You know, like they have to be there at your beck and call if, you know, something's wrong. And if they fail to do that, guess what? They don't become a successful landlord. Nobody rents that property because you suck. There are things like, these like companies that own like
the property management company.
Yeah, property management, and that's shitty. I hate those people. But you know, it doesn't mean that it's like, you know, shouldn't be legal. But you know, my experiences with like personal like people who are owning and maintaining properties, like when we were renting a house in Wisconsin, the guy that owned the property, and he owned a few properties. He owned the properties to have something to do during his retirement.
Yeah.
He owned these properties to keep him busy, not because he wanted to sit back and like count his money. It wasn't a lucrative business for him. It wasn't, you know, he didn't need to do it. He did it because he wanted to stay busy, and it kept him busy. You know, I'm like, you guys have these weird, bizarre, like, and it's something I kept saying. It's like very infantile, like just how they view things, because it's like they have this boogeyman image, you know, like it's just
they just view everyone as a disgusting slumlord who's exploiting people.
Yes. So let me jump in. Shit.
Oh, what's going on?
I think we have a feedback thing or something there.
What's happening with my volume, and I can't hear anything anymore, so I put it on a speaker. Are you hearing the feedback right now?
Not. Yeah, I'm hearing some feedback.
Okay.
I don't know what's going on there. Do you have any headphones?
Yeah.
That's what usually helps me. That's why I wear them, because just to stop the feedback. Usually because I have this like fancy mic.
Yeah. All of a sudden, everything got turned way down. So
that was weird. Well, I can hear you now without the feedback. But
right.
So for the chat, if you guys have some questions you want to ask David, feel free to jump in real quick. But for David, I would like to discuss a little bit. I'm not sure how much longer you want to stay on. I was going to try to keep it to about 2 hours.
I can stay on for as long as you guys want. I don't have time to do
it. So one of the things I want to jump into is your gun right activism. If you would like to kind of give the viewers maybe some overview there of where you come from and what you try to do.
Yeah, so you know, obviously I'm extremely pro-gun. I mean, I absolutely pro-gun. I own a lot of guns. I'm not, because a lot of libertarians are pro-gun, but they're not necessarily super big into guns. I mean, if you heard me mention it earlier, my dream is to have like 1,000-acre property so I can set up a 1,000+ yard shooting range. I mean, some people want to have like a ranch for riding horses. Some people want to have a ranch for, you know, farming. I want to have one for shooting guns. To give you an idea of how big into guns I am. So yeah, I do quite a bit of like pro-gun activism. In the past, Oregon, unfortunately, like a year or two ago, passed a law that you can't do private transfers of firearms without doing background checks, which I don't really follow, but it did put a damper in some of my more fun activities. I used to go crash gun buybacks. I've probably bought 40 or 50 guns over the years at gun buybacks, kept a few, sold most of them. You know, I'd clean them up, resell them, much more than I spent on them.
Yeah.
So for those who don't understand what that is, a gun buyback is like when the government is offering you $100, $150 to turn in your gun to get destroyed. Well, I would just go stand on the sidewalk with a stack of $20 bills and be like, I'll give you cash instead of a gift card.
Yeah.
And I'd buy guns. And I mean, the best deals I got, I would get guns that were worth $800 for $100.
Nice.
I made some, I would usually make a couple $1,000s every time I went to one. And then I'd usually just keep a couple guns for myself and grow my collection.
Well, yeah, why not? Yeah.
Very cheap. So I did that. I've gone to a lot of I've done a lot of open carry protests at, whenever the Tea Party was doing stuff right after I got out of the Army a couple of years ago, I would go open carry like an AR-15 and hold an anti-war sign to confuse people.
That's great.
One of my favorite things to do is to make signs that are like very thought-provoking and make people really like reconsider their preconceived notions. People have this idea that gun owners are like these staunch Republicans. So I went to the big. I organized recently a counter protest to the March for Our Lives thing that was near my house, and we got 20 people to go out there and just kind of protest with open carried rifles and handguns and stuff. Protest the anti-gun people. I think that might have been the first thing you'd seen from me was that picture that got shared.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, so a picture of me got pretty viral, probably got 10,000 shares across various platforms of me holding a sign that says real threats to liberty, and it lists off a bunch of both like liberal and conservative things that are threats to liberty. It's like Donald Trump on one hand, and border control on another hand, all that sorts of stuff. And then at the end, it's like guns aren't a threat to liberty. So I like doing stuff like that, trying to make people think, trying to engage people. I'm actually, hopefully in a couple of weeks here in May, I will be debating in a public debate. It's going to be recorded, live streamed and stuff, so everybody can watch it. I'm going to be debating the student organizer of that March for Your Life event.
Nice.
So that should be fun. I'm really excited for that because.
Wait, are you talking about David Hogg or?
Not David Hogg, the local guy.
Oh, okay.
His name's.
If you can debate David Hogg, I would watch the shit of that. Yeah, no.
I mean, maybe I would love that. I mean,
that would be
amazing. Lead to that eventually, but no. For now, it's his kid Brian Josephson, the local high school.
Okay.
But it'll be good. I mean, I think it's some significant views online. There really hasn't ever been, to my knowledge, I've looked all over YouTube for this. Anybody that really did just a straight up moderated, structured debate, and I think I'm pretty good at debating, and I think I have a lot of information, and I think I'm going to be able to crush them pretty easily. So that'll be fun. What else do I do?
Yeah.
Gun rights wise?
No, I don't doubt it. No.
I've made quite a few.
You're already right. So.
Yeah, exactly. I do have that on my side. But I will say, there's a lot of people that are right about gun rights that sound like idiots when they start debating it.
That's true.
And it's just embarrassing. You go there, they're just spouting off all these platitudes. You'll never hear me say even though I do theoretically agree with it, I won't be like, the only thing that can stop a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun. I like to stick to arguments that are tougher to just blow off. Things
that's true. A lot of people blow off that or try to just counter back with some hyperbole.
Right. So I stick a lot to statistics. I'll show them. Well, oh sure, you want to cite Australia because their crime went down. Well, New Zealand has a much stronger gun culture than Australia, and they didn't pass any new laws, and their crime went down just as much. So you actually saw it was probably a societal shift.
We're also talking about fucking America, that has so many guns. How do you just stop those guns from existing?
There's that. I like to also bring in, because I have a lot of experience as a shooter. I grew up shooting in the military. Since I got out of the military, I've taken quite a few private courses. Defensive carbine courses, defensive handgun courses, taking numerous ones of those. So I'm a pretty knowledgeable shooter. I'm definitely beyond your just average person's I support gun rights. And so I'll bring up things I have dozens of people that look up to me for advice on guns and will come to me regularly and be like, oh, what should I get, for home defense and stuff. Because you hear all these people who've barely ever shot or never shot. Like Joe Biden. Did you ever see the clip where he's like, just get a shotgun. Just get a double-barreled shotgun.
Shoot a shotgun off your balcony.
It's that's responsible.
Yeah.
And so what I tell people is, no, the best thing, I am a competent, trained marksman with years of experience and tens of thousands of rounds of experience under my belt. I feel pretty comfortable defending myself with a handgun. Most people might feel comfortable defending themselves with a handgun, but they shouldn't because they're terrible. It's honestly a problem that I have with a lot of gun culture is that they're undertrained and they don't shoot enough. And I don't know how many times I've taken people to the range and they're like, oh yeah, my sights are off. And I grab their gun and I'm like, no, they aren't. You don't know. You don't have any trigger discipline.
It's like you're off.
You're jerking every time you shoot it. I'll put like a snap cap hidden in their magazine, and when it gets to it,
do you do that? Do you do like gun training?
I mean, just for like friends. I would love to in the future. In the future, I've actually the last 2 or 3 years, I've really cut back on my shooting a lot. I've barely shot my ARs and stuff. It's mostly at this point like every 2 or 3 months when I'm at a friend's house in the country, I'll shoot my handguns a little bit to stay competent since I carry them. I'll get to this in a minute, but being a filmmaker, I've really had to go all in on it. And just for financial reasons and time reasons, I'm not shooting as much the last about 3 years or so as I was before. But soon I should hopefully be out of the struggling artist phase, and then I can get back into really shooting a lot. And someday it's going to be all I do in my free time. I would love to someday like get qualified as a trainer and stuff and be able to do that. But for now, I just teach friends and family and stuff. But yeah, so what I always tell people is like most the best weapon that you can give, especially to someone who's a woman or elderly, a little guy, it's like, okay, I'm like 6 foot tall, 185, 190 pounds. Like, it's easy for me to use a 12 gauge shotgun. What about some guy that's 5'4"? I have a good friend who had a heart condition his whole life. He's 5'4", probably was 100 pounds. I'm not going to give that guy a 12 gauge shotgun to defend himself. I'm going to give him a pistol caliber carbine. Anyone who's elderly, infirmed, disabled, a small woman, small statured in general, they need.
If you don't mind me jumping in real quick, and I'm going to say something, and you as a veteran, I'm sure you've had this exact same experience. Because I always bring up this story when I talk about that dumbass reporter that like fired an AR-15 and said it bruised his shoulder and it sounded like a bazooka. I'm like, okay, look, when I was in basic training, and like I'm willing to bet that you have the same experience. The drill sergeants put the fucking butt of an M16 on their chin and fired it, and then he put it on his balls and he fired it.
I remember. I've seen that before.
Yeah, like I've talked to vets that said like, they did that. And like they did that to show like, look, this thing has no fucking recoil. So I'm like saying like, here, you're like a 98-pound woman, just fire a shotgun. It's different than being like fire an AR-15 because like, hey, guess which one has less recoil? It's insane though. Like that does show when you're trying to advise a person on what kind of weapon would suit them best. If you're like jumping to shotgun, that is not a weapon that everybody can handle. Real quick from the chat. I
did see that question. I can answer that.
From Paleo, you can?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, yes.
So the question is, I'm actually like, I have at least 2 lawyers that consult me about gun laws. So I'm pretty knowledgeable about this stuff. The question is, what can the government do if you make your own gun? Do you have to have a license for it, register it? The answer is no. But in short, you can basically make your own gun as long as it's not something that would otherwise be illegal. So you can't make an automatic weapon. You can't make a short-barreled shotgun, short-barreled rifle. But if it's a weapon that would otherwise be legal, you can absolutely make it.
Well, hasn't there been like buyback programs where somebody made a basic gun and then actually got cash for it?
I have seen people do it. I know guys that have gone and made little 12-gauge shotguns with pipe from Home Depot and turned them. I've never done that. I always went to pawn shops and got cheaper stuff because I didn't want to waste my time and have them be like, oh, I'm not going to give you stuff. But like at one of the gun buybacks, I spent about $200 going to pawn shops, and I'd go to places that had like a couple $80 crappy pistols. There'd be like 3 of them that are never going to sell. And I'd be like, could I buy all 3 of those for $100? And they're like, sure. I went and made $900 just turning in crappy guns. Then bought
isn't there even there's a thing now where some people are able to like 3D print at least parts for guns?
Yeah, usually, yes. You could 3D print an entire gun. It's very basic. It's like I haven't followed it super closely, but I know they can do single shot ones. I think someone's maybe developed some repeaters now. I think there's a revolver design out there, but legally you can't just make a plastic gun. So they usually incorporate like, here's a random piece of metal you put in the handle, so it can't get the metal detector. But yes, you can 3D print an entire gun. The better thing to do with 3D printing is to like print an AR lower receiver, print a magazine, stuff like that. Because when you're printing an entire gun, it's usually like, here's a single shot, you know, one-time use pistol. You have to swap out a whole new 3D printed barrel, and it fires like a 38 special or something, like the lowest pressure round.
I don't know much about when it comes to 3D printing, but I'm like, is it like it's actually like legitimately possible to like print a lower receiver or an upper receiver?
Oh, I don't know if anyone's done an upper. I'd have to look into that. But lowers, absolutely. Lowers are one of the first things people started doing.
Yeah, like I mean, I've heard like the stories when it comes up of like people 3D printing guns, and like I don't know much honestly when it comes to 3D printing, so I didn't know like
I'm not an expert on
it. You obviously know more than I do, but because like you were answering some of my questions.
Real quick, just
to finish discussion though.
Just to finish Paleo Libertarian's question, as far as registering it goes. This could vary from state to state. I don't know every single state's laws. I know in Oregon you don't have to register it. Most states you're not going to have to register it. The idea of gun registration is a misnomer outside of like Illinois and maybe a couple other places. You know, usually when people will always say, "Oh, I bought this gun at the store; it's registered." No, it isn't. If you buy a gun at a store or any sort of FFL holder and they run a background check, all it means is that they've ran a background check, and now you fill out what's called a Form 4473 that the gun store then is required to hold on to for, I believe, 15 years. And so if the government ever found a handgun at a crime scene, you know, here, say they find my Springfield 1911 at a crime scene. They'd find the serial number, and they'd go to Springfield and say, who did you sell this serial number to? And they'd find the FFL holder they transferred it to in their list of whatever the forms are. I'm not sure if it's the 4473 for them, but they'd find that. They'd say, we sold this to Sportsman's Warehouse in Medford, Oregon. Then they'd go to Medford, Oregon and be like, okay, this gun was sold to you in 2008. Who bought it? They'd have to go through their records. So there's not like a register that's like type in a serial number and your name pops up. It's more of a paper trail. So that's a really common misconception, though, that there is
that's good information. I mean, like and then that's the thing. Just even using the word misconception, that applies to just so much in general when it comes to guns. And even people who are pro guns can have so many misconceptions on just very basic and common things. It's easy because there's so much. I'm sorry, but like it's easy when there's so much misinformation out there to not know the answer to some things.
I hear legal misconceptions from pro-gun people all the time. And that's kind of what I was saying. Like, I feel like I'm a good person to debate this issue because I know everything about it. I have a lot of really good arguments. You know, I am a filmmaker and a storyteller, so I can both do the logical argument and then also kind of, you know, do the more heartstrings tugging argument where I'm like, you really want to deprive a single mother of her most important means of defense?
When you do this debate, let me know when that's going to happen. I will promote the fuck out of it on Twitter. Because that sounds like I would love to watch that. I think that would be great. Real quick, I do want to kind of wind down the stream for today. No, I want to, for one thing, David, I would love it if we could have you back on in the future sometime because this has been so great. You had so much good just information. Hearing your story has been great. I do, before we, if anybody in the chat has some last minute questions you want to throw out, but for a second, I want to turn it over to Jason. If you have anything you kind of want to ask him or anything before, like final lead ups you want to do.
No, I really enjoyed listening to your story, though. I mean, I've listened to John. I was never in the military, so I went to college right out of high school, and they tried to recruit me to the military, and I was like, no, I'm not doing that. I don't know. I just had a very like anti-military stance, like, and I mean, I believe in having a military, but not like on the scale that we have a military currently, and then we're trying to beef it up even more and
where
be
it's
the
an
world
industrial complex rather than just a defense force.
It's ridiculous, and it's imperialism, really. And you know, and I don't know. Anyways, but it's really cool to get like the inside story from people who actually went through it, especially ones who have a libertarian bent, because you know, I totally would have probably gone I would probably would have gone the route you had gone with the conscientious I can't say it, conscientious objector.
Yes.
Because like ultimately or something, I don't know. But I don't know if that I would have been able to go through what you guys went through with a clean conscience.
And it sounds like too, I mean, like David, I have a lot of respect for you that because I've talked to a lot of people in the military who have come out with their opinions changed. I think you're the first veteran I've spoken to that stuck to their convictions as like hardcore as you did, and that's an amazing thing. So
it's a great story too.
It's an amazing story. I'm happy you were able to tell us this and get it out there.
Yeah, thank you. I should.
Beyond that.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say beyond that. I mean, I don't really have too much to add to the conversation because, like, I didn't have those experiences, but I really enjoy hearing about them. And you know, I would love to. I'm going to look into your videos and stuff too. I want to see some of your other work because I also I currently haven't done any work video editing wise, but like I have a passion for video editing. I need to get back into it. And
so
eventually we'll get just real quick for anybody watching. I did add in David's link to his channel in the description, so you can find it there and check out his videos. I highly encourage it.
So
I was just going to say that ultimately, eventually, you know, for people who are interested, I have to get a good. I just now bought a computer for the first time in like 10 years, and well, like 5 years, but like I'm getting a video editing program, and we'll get some videos beyond just the live streams on. Yeah,
and that's something we want to do at Sarcasm and Liberties. Have some political videos. Yeah, and like and that's probably going to be like me handling more of the live streams and Jason handling more of the like just kind of regular like political kind of videos,
educational videos and things like that.
Yeah, exactly.
But like with more of our flavor, it's going to be more comical and satirical and you know.
So David, if you can see in the chat, there is one last question for you. You see that one right there from Paleo?
Yeah, I mean, I honestly, like, that's just pure partisan politics when people say that. I don't even know if the military's budget got cut. I mean, Obama was the president almost the entire time I was in the military. You know, except I enlisted about 6 months before the 2008 election. So
for me, I actually got out like right at the end of Bush's. I got out in 2008.
Gotcha. Okay, so you were getting out right as I was getting in.
That's what it sounds like, yeah.
Yeah, so I don't know. Honestly, what I tell them is that that's just ignorant. Obama's a huge war hawk, and the military's huge still. I don't know what they're talking about when they say that.
So, yeah, and that's just for anybody who didn't see. He's asking about the Republicans saying the military has been decimated over the last 8 years. And he just added a modifier that the budget has more than doubled since 2000. So, yeah. And then there's another question of, you know.
Oh, how is it to share the same first name as Hogg? He's a disgrace.
He is.
He's a disgrace, but it's not like there's any shortage of Davids that are pieces
of shit. He's such a punk kid, that guy.
There's a lot of really cool Davids, too. Come on.
There's some great Davids. We have an Uncle David. That's a great guy.
The joy of having a common name is there's a lot of good and a lot lot of bad guys. I don't even think about it, honestly.
Yeah. So, before we wrap this up, I do want to say, David, I would love to have you back on sometime, and we can kind of focus on some more areas. I do want to bring you on to like a Sunday stream where we can have a more personalized chat like this. If you are ever interested, Tuesdays and Thursdays, I do group streams where we just kind of cover random topics. I usually have a panel of people. If you're ever interested, I'd love to have you on one of those as well. But I do want to bring you on another one of our Sunday streams in the future where we can have some of these personalized chats.
I'd love to. I know the next month or so I'm going to be unavailable. I'm going to be working on Sundays.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah. I'm trying to maintain. We're going to keep me and Jason do our Sunday streams where we'll bring in special guests like you. And we're doing them at the same time. Tuesday and Thursdays, I do a group stream with different topics at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And then it's going to be between Fridays and Saturdays. I haven't completely worked it out where I'm going to try to make it a weekly mental health stream talking about mental health subjects.
Gotcha.
Well, so
before we wind down and finish up here, if I can just plug my work a little bit.
Well, and that's what I was actually going to say before we ended. I wanted to give you a moment, a platform to plug whatever you need to plug, and
Right. So my YouTube channel, I have quite a few like pro-gun videos on there, kind of politically oriented videos. If any of you have seen the video or heard of the term ghost gun, I basically made that famous by making a video that made fun of Kevin De Leon for saying that and just talking out of his ass about guns. But actually, that's, as a filmmaker, that kind of stuff really isn't my purpose. I don't even know if you guys are aware of this or not. But really, my main purpose as a filmmaker is I'm a narrative filmmaker. Meaning like I make like action movies and thrillers and stuff with a story. I do some documentary stuff mostly for competitions or for things I'm getting paid. But really, narrative content is definitely what I do. The next film I'm trying to get, my big goal right now is by the end of the year, I want to have at least about $250,000 budget lined up to shoot my next feature film, which is it's a thriller. It's about a young pastor who takes a job rebuilding a disgraced church in the middle of nowhere, and because the police department is incompetent, is kind of forced to play detective and unravel a huge mystery.
Nice. Do you have like a GoFundMe or like a Patreon or anything?
I don't at this point. I may
if you get something like that set up, let me know. I will push it out on Twitter.
Definitely. That probably won't be for a while. Right now, my plan for that is probably traditional funding, finding investors.
Is that going to be like your first feature length, did you say?
This will actually be my second feature length film.
Okay.
I made a feature length adaptation of Pilgrim's Progress for my church. So I never would have thought my first feature film would be a family-friendly musical, a fantasy musical, but it was. And for what it was, I think it turned out pretty good. What I was going to say is if anyone wants to check out my work, I basically make like kind of action thriller movies with a libertarian bent. I did a few films in high school before I joined the military, but I really started in earnest working because my goal is to be like a major theatrical filmmaker where I'm making films with 8-figure budgets, 10, 15, 20, 25, $50 million that are in theaters. Nice. And I think I'm just a few years out from doing that. So I've basically been for the last 6 years of my life. That's all I've been doing is dedicated.
That's amazing. So remind me sometime. I will send you some of the like really like goofy comedy sketches I did in the Army. I think you'd get a kick out of them.
I'd love to check them out.
Good quality. It's just the goofy material. That's the best part. But so just to wrap up real quick, everybody, David Kirk West, look him up on YouTube. I put the link to his YouTube channel. What is your Twitter handle again?
Twitter is @David Kirk West, and I will warn you, I barely use Twitter. I actually check it pretty regularly, but I mostly only follow filmmakers and Hollywood type people to get information and knowledge there. Like if someone tags me in something, I'll probably see it, but I very rarely tweet. I mostly use it.
Do you have any other social media platforms you use, or is it mostly YouTube?
I like to argue with people, so definitely Facebook is the best place to find me.
Well, how can they find you on Facebook?
If you look up David Kirk West, you'll find me on Facebook. I should be very easy to find. And if you're in the Liberty movement, I'm sure we'll have a lot of mutual friends.
Yeah, probably.
So, there's that. It comes up. I'm sending you a friend request now.
Oh, perfect.
Nice.
Real quick, I do want to plug my work again. But if you want to check out, since I told this story today, I should tell you the first real short film I ever made, and it's like 30 minutes long. It's not that short. Was called One Man's Terrorist. And I'm almost hesitant to tell people about it because
Is it polarizing? Or?
No. It's not. Well, I mean, it is. You guys wouldn't be polarized by it.
Okay. Then not much does.
I'm a little embarrassed by the production values. I'm self-taught filmmaker, so I just bought a camera.
David, I'm voluntarily going to show you some of my stuff from the Army. I'm embarrassed by your production values.
But at any rate, the One Man's Terrorist is basically a Red Dawn-esque fictionalized retelling of the story that made me get out of the military.
Nice.
So
I like it.
I think a lot of people really like it. I've had people like cry at the ending and stuff, which is cool. Yeah. I don't know how, because I always hear the flaws when I watch it. So I'd really recommend checking out that. And then
where can they find that? Where can people find that?
On my YouTube channel. If you search One Man's Terrorist, it will be the first thing that comes up.
Okay.
Another film of mine I would really recommend watching because I think it's probably my single strongest film today, and it also deals with a lot of like anti-war and anti-government themes. It's called Liberation. It's about 18 minutes long. It's like an action thriller about a prison break in a dystopian future.
Yeah.
And if you just search Liberation short film, you'll find it right away. But everything's on my YouTube channel. And
yeah, and like I said, I have a link to that in the description. I'm still working my way through all of your videos, but I highly encourage everybody to check it out. He has some really great stuff on his channel. And as anybody who's, if you've been following along the stream, David's clearly, got a good mind there. He's got some good ideas and, a lot of fun to listen to. Thank you so much for joining us, David. I really appreciate getting the chance to hear your story. Has been enlightening, I think. And I hope some people that are watching got something out of it too. So I hope we can have you back on the show sometime in the future. And then if anybody doesn't have anything else, I'm going to go ahead and end the stream now. So you all good or?
I'm good.
All right. Yeah, so definitely check David out, and then we'll see y'all next time. Bye.
All right. Later.